Good afternoon and welcome to Midday Report, live here on TVP World. I'm Maciej. Ukraine has been forced to endure another night of Russian attacks, both Kyiv and the western Ukrainian city of Lviv coming under fire. Moscow has confirmed it had used an Oreshnik-class intermediate-range ballistic missile in the latter attack, the second time this new weapon has been used against Ukraine. Our Ukraine correspondent Katerji joins us now live from Kyiv. Good afternoon, Oz. Tell us about these attacks and also about this Oreshnik missile.
Well, the Oreshnik missile being used, this intermediate-range ballistic missile being used in the western city of Lviv, is the thing that's gathering the most international attention. The situation here in Kyiv is critical, with Mayor Vitaly Klitschko even recommending that some people temporarily leave the city. 6,000 apartments, that's about half of Kyiv's apartment buildings, have been left without power and heating after this attack, which again targeted Ukraine's energy infrastructure. This attack has caused the Ukrainians to call for a UN Security Council meeting, particularly in response to that use of the Oreshnik. The Foreign Minister, Andrei Sybiha, released this statement.
Russia claims it used an intermediate-range ballistic missile, so-called Oreshnik, against Lviv region. Such a strike close to EU and NATO border is a great threat to the security on the European continent and a test for the transatlantic community. We demand strong responses to Russia's reckless actions. We will be initiating international action, an urgent meeting of the UN Security Council, a meeting of the Ukraine-NATO Council, as well as responses within the EU, Council of Europe and OSCE.
Now, this attack left 5 people dead and wounded 24 others. So a significant attack, particularly targeting the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv. Now, the temperatures here in Kyiv are now reaching -10. So it is very cold, especially for those people who now have no heating in their homes. So this is a direct attack on the civilian population. That's certainly the way Ukraine's government sees it. President Zelensky calling on the US to have a strong response to this, and again making the plea for further support with the air defense systems that Ukraine says it needs to defend its skies from attacks like this.
Okay, Katerji reporting from Kyiv, Ukraine. Thank you very much. A hypersonic ballistic missile that has hit Ukraine for the second time during Russia's full-scale war, lauded by Moscow as a groundbreaking weapon system and reportedly impossible to intercept due to hypersonic fight capabilities, the Oreshnik might not actually be as fearsome as the Russians are claiming.
These are the remains of a Russian Oreshnik hypersonic ballistic missile. One of them struck the Ukrainian capital Kyiv during a nighttime attack on January the 9th. This is the second time Russia has used Oreshnik missiles in Ukraine. Moscow first used the Oreshnik to strike the central Ukrainian city of Dnipro in November 2024. It was reportedly launched from the Kapustin Yar, meaning it traveled over 800 kilometers before hitting its target. The Oreshnik is not an ordinary missile. It is an intermediate-range ballistic missile that can reach speeds of up to 7 kilometers per second. Jeffrey Lewis, director of the East Asia Non-Proliferation Program at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies, explains how the Oreshnik missile works.
And so the ballistic missile launches and takes everything up into space, and the first stage falls away, and then the second rocket motor falls away, and then you just have the bus kind of drifting in space, and that is when the little thrusters start to maneuver so it can drop warheads on different locations.
Although it appears to be a groundbreaking new weapon system, according to Jeffrey Lewis, it is simply a combination of old technologies.
This is a new capability, but it is not a capability that represents a dramatic change in the way that conventional weapons are developed. It's a series of old technologies that have been put together in a new way. If the weapon were inherently terrifying, he would just use it. But that's not quite enough. He's had to use it, and then he had to do a press conference, and then he had to do a second press conference to say, hey, this thing is really scary.
The Russian aggression in Ukraine continues to claim more victims among innocent civilians, with at least 4 people killed and many others seriously wounded during the bombing of Kyiv on the night of January the 9th.
The U.S. may introduce a new sanctions package against the Kremlin, but Donald Trump is still uncertain whether he'll resort to this measure. However, he has given the green light to a bipartisan bill regarding sanctions against Russia. The bill could be put to a vote as early as next week, according to Republican Senator Lindsey Graham.
The newly proposed U.S. secondary sanctions bill against Russia would target countries that continue doing business with Moscow, fueling the Kremlin's war machine.
President Trump greenlit the bipartisan Russia sanctions bill that I have been working on for months. This bill would give President Trump tremendous leverage against countries like China, India, and Brazil to incentivize them to stop buying the cheap Russian oil that provides the financing for Putin's bloodbath against Ukraine.
But in his recent interview with Fox News, the U.S. president said although he supports the bill, he hopes he won't have to use it. This back and forth on the diplomatic front is a pattern recognized by experts.
I think President Trump has a consistent approach to how he deals with all international partners, friend or foe, as he has said, which is to keep people off balance, keep people guessing.
He certainly goes back on a lot of promises. You cannot, I think it's part of his strategy. Part of it is that he doesn't go very much into detail on a lot of the policies. A lot of the decisions, especially detailed decisions, he leaves to the people around him.
The secondary sanctions legislation could be used to pressure Moscow into more successful peace talks.
This is something that I think would send a strong and welcome message to both to the Kremlin and to those countries that are helping to facilitate the Russian war machine in Ukraine.
If Moscow is taking the message the right way, that's a signal that D.C. is willing to take a lot more risk in its bilateral relations with Russia in the pursuit of perhaps a ceasefire that's acceptable to D.C. and all parties.
But some experts worry that economic pressure might not be enough.
Until there's significant pressures also on the battlefield, it's going to be hard to see if Putin's going to change. But the most visible change recently in the last week or two of President Trump's attack or willingness to take more risk in pressuring Moscow, seizing the Dark Fleet ships, the most recent one, the Bella 1, recently renamed to Marinera in the North Atlantic.
The U.S. Congress could vote on the sanctions bill as early as next week, with the legislation's author saying he expects a strong bipartisan vote.
Mr. Rhino.
The U.S. Senate has passed a resolution that does not allow U.S. President Donald Trump to take any military action in Venezuela without congressional authorization. Trump is due to meet with oil industry representatives on Friday, having reportedly halted a second attack on Venezuela. All the while, there is little clarity regarding what comes next for the country.
The yeas are 52.
The U.S. Senate voted on Thursday night to advance measures curbing President Donald Trump's Venezuela war powers after a handful of Republicans voted with Democrats.
No one has ever regretted a vote that just says, Mr. President, before you send our sons and daughters to war, come to Congress.
The vote followed Saturday's U.S. raid on Caracas and the capture of Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro. And it seems lawmakers are not alone in their concerns about the American military action. A poll by CBS News YouGov found that 48% approved the move, while 52% disapproved. And crucially for Trump, 70% of those quizzed said they didn't understand his plan for the country. Trump on Thursday night explained part of the plan to Fox News Channel's Hannity, describing Venezuela as a third world country that wouldn't know how to hold a free election. Trump said he was due to meet oil industry leaders on Friday.
We're taking billions and billions of dollars worth of oil, and it'll be hundreds of billions of dollars. It'll be trillions of dollars, but we're going to be there till we straighten out the country. We'll see how the country's doing, but we'll be running the oil.
Experts say, though, that questions remain over how Trump's team will make this work in the wake of Maduro's abduction.
It worked. It was, was successful. Of course, the analysts are saying, so now what? Because it's one thing to kidnap a president, another thing is to actually make Venezuela do the things that the United States wants it to be done, and especially to let the access to the Venezuelan oil.
Caracas on Thursday began freeing a large number of political prisoners, including some foreigners, in an apparent concession to the White House. The US president on Friday posted that he had cancelled a second wave of attacks on Venezuela following cooperation from the country. For the moment, the US leader is riding the raid's success.
Greenland in about 2 months. Let's talk about Greenland in 20 days.
The EU-Mercosur trade deal has passed, a trade agreement that has been adamantly opposed by Poland. In the meantime, Polish farmers have descended upon Warsaw to protest what will be the largest trade deal in the history of the EU. The free trade deal connecting Europe and South America has been in the works for over 25 years. The European Commission sees the agreement as crucial when it comes to boosting the EU's economy, exports and diplomacy. But the deal has also been widely protested by European farmers who fear cheap imports will be unfair competition for their products. Iran has been plunged into complete internet blackout as protests in the country continue for the 12th day. Demonstrations have reached all 31 provinces. The country is currently gripped by the biggest wave of protests in years, which comes just 7 months after the US and Israeli forces bombed Iranian nuclear sites.
For the 12th day in a row, tens of thousands of Iranians are risking their lives to tell the regime they have had enough. People first took to the streets in response to the deteriorating economic situation in the country.
I'm protesting against the high cost of living. People are under severe economic strain. We want officials to do something for the people of Iran, to address the situation or make life more affordable.
Look at this market. None of the shops have customers. Why? Because people don't have money. How can you buy anything now? I'm ashamed in front of my wife and children.
But the protests quickly turned into anti-regime demonstrations.
These are the largest protests since 2022. They did start over economic conditions, especially a collapsing currency, but they are now challenging the power of the regime. And by that, I don't just mean the government, I don't mean the president, I mean the supreme leader, the person who actually has the overall power in Iran.
According to Norway-based NGO Iran Human Rights, at least 45 people, including 8 children, have been killed since the protests began in December. Hundreds were wounded and more than 2,000 were arrested during Wednesday protests alone. Reza Pahlavi, the eldest son of Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the last Shah of Iran, has been trying to fill the leadership vacuum and called out to protesters to take to the streets.
The regime is pushing monarchist slogans, manufacturing supports for him. Why? Because the regime wants to divide this movement and weaken it from within, poison it from within. Because the regime knows Reza Pahlavi is nobody. He has no support inside Iran.
As part of the crackdown on dissent, the Iranian government plunged the country into a complete internet blackout in the hopes of quelling the protests. The movement gained international support, with US President Donald Trump threatening the Iranian government with severe consequences if the response turns too violent.
Finland's town of Pornainen is powered by the world's largest sand battery, drastically cutting fossil fuel use and emissions by about 70%. This is part of Finland's efforts to become climate neutral by 2035.
This is Pornainen, a small, charming Finnish town north of Helsinki, where every winter is dark and extremely cold, with an average of minus 10 degrees Celsius. But local residents and students don't complain about the harsh weather conditions, as inside their homes and schools, it's so warm that only t-shirts and socks are enough.
No need to use any sleeves or shoes at all. It's very nice to be inside and not feel cold at all.
The radiator thermometer is set to 22 degrees all day.
This is thanks to an innovative thermal energy storage system called Sand Battery, which stores heat from wind turbines and solar panels, reduces costs, and cuts CO2 emissions by up to 70%.
It's crushed soapstone, which can hold heat really well. It has a high thermal capacity, better to store large amounts of energy. So we are constantly discharging and charging the system so that we can always provide a steady stream of heat.
And this is how it works.
Heated water from the sand battery comes here. It circulates into the building, and the used
water is going back to the sand battery. It will be recharged there and coming back heated. Cut off electricity, you still have the heat there.
In addition to being self-sufficient, yet another great advantage of sand batteries is that they help residents save money.
Obviously, I'm very happy. I can save almost 300 euros a month.
Finland is the first country with commercial sand batteries built by Polarnite Energy, with Pornainen being the second location after Kankanpa, where they have been deployed. Sand batteries are a bold example of how simplicity can drive powerful sustainability. But not only that, they're also a huge step toward Finland's goal of being climate neutral by 2035.
And now something for animal lovers. A viral clip from the Wrocław Zoo in Poland shows a tiny Chinese muntjac deer boldly approaching a rhino weighing nearly 2 tons. The adorable duo portray a classic David versus Goliath story that is charming viewers worldwide, turning this unlikely encounter into one of the most uplifting animal moments online. Let's take a look. And hopefully that's lifted your moods a little bit. That's all for Midday Report today. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you very soon. Goodbye.